On November 16, 2009, Sergei Magnitsky was murdered in Russian police custody. Sergei had uncovered a massive $230 million Russian government corruption scheme, exposed it, and in retaliation he was arrested, tortured, and killed. Since his murder, laws have been named after him in the United States, Canada, the UK, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania to punish human rights abusers. And Sergei's name has become a rallying cry for victims all over the world who struggle against dictators and kleptocrats. My name is Bill Browder. Sergei Magnitsky was my lawyer. His murder was a heartbreaking loss for me, and I've spent the last 10 years of my life working to make sure that his death wasn't meaningless. November 16th was the 10th anniversary of Sergei Magnitsky's death. And governments, politicians, human rights activists, and regular people all around the world stopped briefly to honor Sergei Magnitsky and remember his sacrifice. However, while everyone else was honoring his sacrifice, the German magazine Der Spiegel published a 3,500-word story arguing that Sergei Magnitsky wasn't a hero at all, and that all of my work honoring his legacy in the last 10 years was a big lie. The article contains so many mistakes, false statements, and omissions that I and my colleagues have felt compelled to prepare this video to show you the truth. I'm not going to share every mistake they've made a lot, but I'm going to share the most important ones with you. The most important inaccuracy of the story was the implication in Der Spiegel that Sergei wasn't deliberately killed. The article implied that Russian prisons are just rough places, and that Sergei was one of the unfortunate 4,000 people who die in Russian prison each year. My colleagues and I spent hours with the Der Spiegel journalists presenting the evidence of how Sergei Magnitsky was murdered. Here are the photographs from Sergei Magnitsky's autopsy. This is Sergei's body. You can see from these pictures that he was beaten in the last hours of his life. You can see bruises, and there was obviously a struggle. Here is the official certificate of death of Sergei Magnitsky. The report says in Russian that Sergei Magnitsky suffered a cerebral cranial injury. In other words, he was hit on the head. Here is the report that says that rubber batons were used on Sergei in the last hour of his life. This report was signed by the assistant deputy to the head of the detention center, and he confirms that rubber batons were applied to Sergei Magnitsky in the last hour of his life. This is the postmortem forensic expert opinion on Sergei Magnitsky's death. This report says that the injuries which Sergei Magnitsky had were caused from the traumatic application of a blunt, hard object. These reports confirm that Sergei Magnitsky was beaten in the last hour of his life. He was beaten by riot guards with a rubber baton. He suffered visible injuries that we could see. He suffered a head injury that we can't see. And the Russian officials have confirmed all this in their own official report. The Russian President's Human Rights Council, on the 4th of July 2011, who had examined the same evidence, came to the conclusion that there was a reasonable suspicion that Sergei Magnitsky had died from his beatings. It wasn't just the President's Human Rights Council that came to this conclusion. The Council of Europe appointed a special rapporteur to investigate Sergei Magnitsky's death. The title of their report was Refusing Impunity for the Killers of Sergei Magnitsky. And in their report, they verified that Sergei Magnitsky was beaten right before he died. And finally, the European Court for Human Rights ruled on the death of Sergei Magnitsky. They found against the Russian authorities. They found that Sergei Magnitsky's right to life was violated, and they found that his ill treatment in detention was intentional. It's inexplicable to me how the journalists at Der Spiegel, looking at all this information and looking at all these findings, could come to a different conclusion than just about everybody else in the world came to. And it's more inexplicable to me how an esteemed publication like Der Spiegel, how the fact checkers didn't pick this up before the article was published. Part of the logic of the Der Spiegel article in claiming that Sergei Magnitsky wasn't murdered was to make a further claim, to say that Sergei Magnitsky wasn't a whistleblower, and therefore there was no motive for his killing. The article said that at no point did Sergei Magnitsky raise concrete charges against the police officers personally. I was completely shocked by this statement because Sergei Magnitsky was a whistleblower, and I showed proof of that to the Der Spiegel journalists. The most important document we gave Der Spiegel was Sergei Magnitsky's testimony against the police officers on the 5th of June 2008, where Sergei named Lieutenant Colonel Artyom Kuznetsov and Major Pavel Karpov 30 times and discussed how they seized all the documents and records. Then we showed him Sergei's statement, which says, "So the aforesaid circumstances are objective evidence that in 2007, 3 companies with all their assets were misappropriated with the possible use of the materials and information seized during the search." How the Der Spiegel journalists came to the conclusion that these words were not accusing the police officers is beyond me. But that's not all. Sergei Magnitsky gave further testimony against the police officers on the 7th of October 2008. In that testimony, he confirmed the accusations that he made in the previous testimony, and then went on to accuse the police officers of being a part of a criminal group that stole $230 million. It's in black and white. It's in the documents. I gave those documents to Der Spiegel journalists. But you don't have to take my word for it. The Council of Europe, in their investigation into the murder of Sergei Magnitsky and the circumstances around it, came to the exact same conclusion. And if you don't believe the Council of Europe, the US Justice Department, in their indictment of 2 Russians connected to the money laundering of this case, went through the exact same documents and came to the exact same conclusion. So again, we have a situation where you can see for yourself in black and white what Sergei said. You can see that the Council of Europe confirmed it. You can see that the Department of Justice confirmed it. And many other police organizations around the world have confirmed it. But somehow, the Der Spiegel journalists came to a different conclusion, and the fact checkers back in Germany didn't catch it. Another big point that Der Spiegel tries to make in their article is they make the claim that Sergei Magnitsky wasn't a lawyer. I'm not even sure I understand why it's relevant. Sergei Magnitsky was killed, whether he was a lawyer or something else, but Sergei Magnitsky was a lawyer. Sergei Magnitsky had a license to show up in court to argue tax cases as a certified auditor in the Russian Federation. Let me read to you what it says in the Russian Federation law on auditing activities. It says that a licensed auditor can provide legal advice and representation of clients in courts with the tax authorities and on tax and customs disputes. And that's exactly what Sergei Magnitsky did. Sergei Magnitsky represented me and my firm in court on multiple occasions. He represented many other clients on multiple occasions. There are court docket records proving this, and we provided those court documents to the Der Spiegel journalists to prove that he represented us in court. Sergei Magnitsky was so good at representing clients in court that he was promoted to become the head of the tax practice at the US law firm Firestone Duncan in Moscow. But don't take my word for it. Let's listen to Sergei Magnitsky's words himself. In his testimony that he gave to the Russian State Investigative Committee when he accused the police officers of being involved in the crime, as he presented his own professional qualifications, he said, "By the type of my professional activity, I provide advisory services regarding the Russian law." And if we had any doubt, let's just look at what President Vladimir Putin said about it.
Господин Магнитский, как известно, не был каким-то правозащитником, он не боролся там за права человека. Он был юристом господина Браудера.
I'm continually perplexed about why Der Spiegel focused on this point. If Sergei Magnitsky had been a builder or a teacher or a doctor, and he had exposed massive government corruption, and he had been killed over it, would that have been okay? I think we all know the answer. But the one thing that Der Spiegel didn't focus on in their article was the elephant in the room, which was who got the money. Who got the $230 million that Sergei Magnitsky exposed and was killed over? $11.7 million went to the Swiss account of the husband of the tax official who approved the $230 million tax refund. Millions more went to purchase luxury real estate for her and her colleagues in Dubai. The US Department of Justice traced $2 million from the crime to purchase luxury real estate in Lower Manhattan. And the Panama Papers leak revealed that Putin's best friend from childhood, Sergei Roldugin, a famous Russian cellist, received $800,000 from the crime that Sergei Magnitsky exposed. Since Sergei Magnitsky's murder, we've set out to trace where the $230 million went that he exposed and he was killed over. And we found most of the money. There are now 16 countries that have opened money laundering investigations connected to this crime, It's understandable why Putin is so upset with the Magnitsky story, with our campaign for justice. I don't think it's an accident that the story came out at this point in time. We're on the cusp of getting the EU to pass the Magnitsky Act, which would impose sanctions on the people who killed Sergei Magnitsky and human rights abusers around the world. Germany is a key player in this debate. And if there's one thing that the Russian government wants, is for Germany to have doubts about the Magnitsky Act. This Der Spiegel article is so full of factual inaccuracies, mistakes, and omissions, the editors of Der Spiegel should be ashamed of themselves. This article spits on the grave of Sergei Magnitsky, and they should apologize to his family for the hurt and distress that they've caused.